Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story that is very contemporary. So as I mentioned, we don't cancel a speaker or an activator, even through the challenges that we've all experienced here. And we have global, national and local speakers and activators at our summits, and it's really important. Like Annie and Belle and Beck have all been involved in summits like you as guests and come here. And someone we've connected with recently is a person called Annalise Jennings, and you might have seen her earlier in the program. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about why why Annalise, too many A's, isn't here with us in person. She's going to be zooming in from Melbourne. So a few weeks ago, we thought that Peter Baines was going to be here in person, and Annalise couldn't be because she's from Victoria. It turns out that both of them couldn't be here, but Annalise actually made it here to Adelaide. She was here yesterday. So she flew over early, went through all of the different protocols, and my word, we were learning a lot more than just how to eat and drink with the different protocols that we needed to take in place. She managed to get across the border, managed to get a COVID test, managed to eventually get to a hotel here, and then the announcement of 5 local infections came out. And given that Annalise has very recently lost both of her parents and needs to be back home for a whole range of things, decided that it was most important that she isn't locked in here in South Australia. So as sad as I am, and I can speak for Katrina on this as well, we couldn't have the wonderful Annalise Jennings with us here in person. But as you know, the show goes on, and we do have her here on screen, and it's going to be delightful to learn about how connection can change community. Annalise Jennings has a really wonderful story to tell us about just how she's been affected by a community and the connection that's grown from that. I know you will love hearing her story. So can we beam Annalise in, give her some applause, and enjoy what she has to share with us. Hi Annalise, take it away.
Hi there. Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And thank you for that warm welcome. And COVID certainly teaches us a lot about purpose, resilience, adapting, pivoting, all the things that you've all gone through over the past 18 months and that we've gone through together. I'm honoured to be here with you today. So I'm going to ask you to pay forward all that beautiful energy, and because I'm going to need your support today. I pay my respects to Indigenous people past and present, and I acknowledge in particular and thank Uncle Mickey for his warm welcome to his country here today. So thank you. But I found myself thinking about my parents, and Matt, thank you for acknowledging my parents' passing. And they passed away only a few weeks ago and within only a few weeks of one another. And as I thought deeply about them, wow, this magnificent image appeared, and so I snapped this photo, and I'd like to think that this is a blessing from my parents and to all of you here today. And as I reflected on this blessing, the phone rang, and it was my Aboriginal tribal mother. Her name is Mary Ann. And she reminded me about my work, my purpose, and that there are moments in life where we step into the unknown. And so it's our purpose that drives us forward through the triumphs, through the challenges, and through life's lessons. And so today I share my story about the evolution of a beautiful Aboriginal community. My story today is about the Aboriginal community of Napranum, and I pay my respects to Aboriginal elder Marianne Coconut, who is also my tribal mother, Thanikwith elder. Her language name is Amominja, and she is the sugar glider. Pay my respects also to Roy Chevethan, who is the previous mayor of the community of Napranum, the story that I'll be sharing with you today. And Roy is a proud Wickwaya man, and his vision for his community continues to inspire me. And as Mickey shared earlier in his presentation, our heart tells us where to go. And so I trust that this is a heart-centered session that connects all of you. And so before we go any further, and I guess this is the first tip that I'd like to share with you, connection before content. And it's a principle that I feel is fundamental and should be part of everything that we do, before any meeting that we have, before any conversation that we have, before we move into task, that we take a moment to connect. And so I'm going to ask you, and you've got about 30 seconds to do this, to turn around to the person immediately next to you. And this is the question that I'd like you to answer with your partner, is why does today's gathering matter to you? And when you hear the sound of the chimes, I'm going to ask you to come back to the room. So you've got a minute, 30 seconds each. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the room. And I trust that you've had one or two moments or thoughts of insights in what has inspired you about today and why a gathering like today is so important for us. And for me personally, it matters because my purpose is to help to create a more connected humanity. And so for me, that starts at home with my two sons. And so who I am as a mother is a reflection of who I am as a facilitator and as a member of the community. And so gatherings like this serve as a reminder of what my purpose is. And so I have another question for you today. And my question is, where and how in your life have you said that something is just not possible? Where and how in your life have you found yourself halfway up a really steep mountain and you look over your shoulder and you feel that there's just nobody there, and you feel that there are moments when you feel alone and you feel that it's just really, really tough to get yourself to the top of the mountain. And I've had many, many moments, as I'm sure that you have as well. And I recall some of the first and early moments that I had when I first started my purpose and my work in Aboriginal communities, and in talking to probably thousands of Aboriginal people across so many communities. I found through dialogue that hope, jobs, education, career, longevity was so far away from the reality of what some of these communities were facing. And I remember in one particular community, I gathered a group of young women and I asked them about their hopes and dreams, and they became really animated about their vision for themselves and for their community. And then it was like this veil came across one of the young women, and she said to me, "Annalise, nothing is ever going to change around here." And I knew in that moment that I was going to commit to staying with community for some years to come. I'm going to circle back to that particular young woman throughout this presentation. And what I found also through talking with so many community people is that what they were looking for the most was that shift from paternalism, punishment, prohibition to true community ownership and self-determination. And so the story continued, and the 4 principles of community. And as I share with you these principles, please note the principles that resonate for you the most. Write them in your notes, and you'll find that these principles will come more and more to life as we continue through the presentation. But these were principles that were essential as a foundation for the work in community. And so when we think about belonging, Vicky voiced it beautifully earlier when she said, country gives me a place of belonging, a place I'm spiritually connected to. Have you ever stepped out on country or anywhere, out in the open, out in nature, and you have felt an unexplainable vibration that moves through you? And it's almost, there isn't really even an English word to describe this feeling. And I have felt it only twice in my life. And once I felt it right here at this site on Aboriginal land in Bochat, where this picture was taken. And so the space of belonging is about ownership. It's about co-creation. It's the sense that you've been engaged. And in the absence of that belonging and ownership, it feels like intervention. It feels like paternalism. It feels like control. The second principle of connectedness, and one of the great thinkers that I met on the topic of connectedness are elders Des and Estelle from a remote Queensland Aboriginal community. And Des points out that this new way of thinking and seeing our place in the world is not really new at all, but rather it speaks to the spiritual traditions of native Indigenous cultures around the world. And the survival of our humanity depends on our ability to understand the basic principles of cause and effect and to live accordingly. And I'm reminded of my first time in Aboriginal community when Des drew the picture of 2 trees representing 2 independent structures, and the network of roots below the surface representing that we are all connected. And I remember he looked at me and he said, Annalise, if I hurt, you hurt. And in that I heard, my success is your success and my failure is your failure, and there is no them and us. The third principle, from problem to possibility, is where we allow ourselves to think that the foundation for great strategy, the foundation for great community, is to put our hearts and mind into the opportunity, into the possibility, into looking at what are the gifts of community. I remember an elder some time ago saying to me, Annalise, we are not problems to be solved. We are people with gifts. We are people with contributions to make. So let's serve and let's nurture the gifts of community. The fourth, caring for the well-being of the whole, requires us to leave our individual agendas at the back door and to come together in a conversation about what is it that we are here to create together. And I love this image. I'm sure glad the whole isn't at our end of the boat. And so we are all in this together. And so this is an opportunity for us to come together. And so I trust that you've been taking notes of those 4 principles and that something is starting to connect you, that there's a resonance there for you. For me, my new day started, over a decade ago when I was working in corporate banking. Yes, I was a banker, but I'm okay now. I'm a recovering banker, and I loved my job in banking. And I took a holiday to far north Queensland. I was only supposed to be there for 4 days. And I fell in love with the people and I fell in love with the communities, and 4 days became long service leave, 12 months leave without pay. And eventually my boss said to me, Annalise, are you coming home? And I said, I found a purpose. And no, I won't be coming home. And that was the shift from corporate banking to First Nations people, and not without a degree of anxiety. So again, coming back to the community of Napranum in far north Queensland, Napranum is a beautiful name and it means meeting place. And my blessing when I started to work in communities is that I actually didn't know anything about Aboriginal communities. I hadn't knowingly met an Aboriginal person. I knew nothing about Aboriginal policy. And so this was a blessing in disguise, where I walked in with a completely blank canvas and started to ask some great questions. Who am I? And what's my purpose? What are we here to create together? And when these questions were put to Napranum, what started to evolve was the beginning of a visionary plan. And I am a strategist and I love creating plans. And so we decided to come together as a community and develop our very first community-owned visionary plan. We got together with elders, and I asked the elders and communities across Napranum to draw their image of the future. And this is Elder Richard Barclay, who started to draw his representation of what Napranum could look like in the future, including a war memorial, which would be front and centre and pride of place. He drew a school, a bus, supermarket, roads, civic centre, street lights, birthing centre, playground, roads. These are all the things that were absent from the community of Napranum and things that we take for granted in our mainstream communities. But most of all, what the community wanted was ownership, belonging, connectedness. The reality is that Napranum was labelled the second poorest community in Queensland. The statistics, not specifically for Napranum, but for Aboriginal communities, we all know the statistics. Youth suicide continues to be on the increase. Numeracy, literacy and health on the decrease. And there were many moments where I started to feel moments of anxiety and wondering what I was doing there. And I would pray to the ancestors to give me guidance and really starting to question myself, what am I really here to do? And how can I be of service? And how can I continue to work in communities? And I remember Mary Ann sitting me down and saying to me, life is like a rose. And you must never take your eye off the rose at the end of the stem. And along that stem, there are many thorns, but never ever take your eye off the rose at the end of the stem. And with that, we would take a deep breath and we would continue to embed those principles of belonging, connectedness, caring for the whole, and shifting our perspective from the problem to the possibility. Within 2 years, true community ownership started to happen. We saw a significant shift. We saw 60% increase in employment. Our youth experiencing optimism and hope. And the young woman who said to me, Annalise, nothing is ever going to change around here. I won't single her out, but she's in this photo. And she was the first young woman to ring me up and say, Annalise, I've got a job. It's my first job and I can't believe this has happened for me. And so the youth started to engage in leadership dialogues. Within 18 months, 75% were employed, and I would say, looking at that picture, all of them have held greatness and wonderful opportunities in the community and beyond. We saw 50% increase in community-owned ownership, a daycare centre, an epic supermarket. Now, this is the first supermarket in Napranum in 15 years. Now, I remember when I started coming to Napranum and visiting, and I needed some supplies, I asked, where do I get some groceries? And someone said to me, Annalise, you have to go to the knock knock shop. Now, I didn't know what a knock knock shop was, but sure enough, it was like a shed and there was a little door and you knock, knock, and the little door opens and there are basic supplies. So we were all very grateful for this little knock knock shop, but what was really needed was a supermarket that the community could feel proud of. A new civic centre was established, restaurant, takeaway, community-owned housing. This was our first joint venture where Aboriginal people designed and built their own homes. New clubhouse, new roads, town signage. I remember when that sign was painted and the paint was still wet. And I remember in some of the earlier years and months when I was visiting Napranum, there was no town signage, and I would just keep going past Napranum and end up in a completely different place and have to find my way back. So this is a proud community. We established Time Bank, where hundreds of people across the community traded 1 hour of work as a time token. So you get a driving lessons, then I'll fix your dad's car. 1 hour of budgeting equals an hour of culture workshops. So a lot of activity in the community. A new library was named after Elder Marianne Coconut. Children banging on the door to get into the library, and this was one of the first images of the children coming in and taking their pride of place. We ran women's programs, women speaking up and taking up leadership roles. I would say every woman, as I look at that picture, has continued to lead in their community. The War Memorial that overlooks the old village where Napranum men enlisted. And again, there's Elder Richard Barclay, who did a beautiful dance at the opening of the War Memorial. Napranum's Splash Park, their dancing fountains, was also established. The Atchimbun Cultural Centre. This was a significant opening of a very significant event, not only for the community of Napranum, but surrounding communities. All of this has happened within a very short space of time, but what we saw most of all was the healing of a community. And in asking Marianne, well, how do we heal? Through gathering, through dance, through singing, through smoking ceremonies, through elders sharing sacred sites, traditional dance. The Napranum dances were established, I think, just in the last 12 months. Spending time with family. And here is Roy, one of his favourite quotes: "It takes a community to raise a child. It takes families supporting families." Essentially, what we invested in was building the social capital of this community. And how was it done? You might have to give me a call, but I'll share with you just a little bit of how it was done. And we called our program Whole of Community Change, and we used the ripple effect as a metaphor to appreciate the impact of our words and the impact of our actions. And coming back to something that Zach said earlier, how does what I do today impact others? We extended it further to say, well, how does what I do today impact 7 generations? And the ripple effect became the essence, our metaphor for our work. Essentially, it was about creating a balance between economic control of the community and community spiritual growth. So one in the absence of the other creates huge gaps. So this was about bringing both of those elements together through engaging the whole of the community, and the community driving this process and taking ownership. We established community values: engagement, ownership, accountability, and fairness. And behind Marianne and Drury, you can see that we created our own values banner. and it appeared everywhere. Everywhere I went and wherever we had these meetings, this community values banner would come with us. So it wasn't just words on a chart. This really meant something to us. And I remember the mayor at the time ringing me, and he said to me, "You know, Annalise, today we had a visit from a government official, and that government official gave us a policy, put it on our conference table, and said, this is what we're doing next." And I looked at that government official and I said, "Do we own it? Do we have mutual accountability? Have we been engaged? Is it fair? And how have we worked together?" And if the answer is no across any of those principles, you can take your policy document with you. And the government official did. So this was a way to embed decision-making and to make it real for the community. A new narrative emerged, a narrative of self-belief, of dreaming big, and the ripple effect continued with ramp upgrades, with waterfront development, cultural grounds upgrades, refurbishment of the PCYC. And essentially what we started to see by balancing these two axes of economic control and community growth, we created our own community-based programs. We influenced our own policies. We were able to influence funding to what the community actually wanted. We focused on the possibility of the community, and what we started to see was domestic violence, school truancy, alcohol, unemployment, all of these negative social indicators starting to fall away dramatically within a very short space of time. And find the power of vision, the magic. In over 20 years as a strategist, in creating strategy in organisations all over the world, I have never seen 90% of goals anywhere come to fruition in just over 2 years. Now I don't know if I can hear your applause, but you really need to applaud the community here because it's pretty outstanding. The ripple effect continued. Marianne and I were invited to Toronto and to speak on the world stage and share the story and the evolution of this wonderful community. We won the finalist award for sustainable communities, and we didn't realise that we were being independently assessed across the United Nations Global Goals. In fact, I'd never heard of them. And until I got a phone call and was told, hey, the program, it's addressed 10 of the 17 UN goals. And with that came an invitation to Nobel. So the opportunity here, and this is for all of you to take notice of, and I asked you to write your reflections about these 4 principles. You can build these principles into your organisations, into your institutions, and in fact, that's the work that I'm committed to doing now, is to continue to embed these ancient, age-old principles in organisations wherever I'm invited to attend. And finally, the blessing. The blessing, and by the way, it ended up being about 6 years of total immersion in Aboriginal communities. I didn't know how long I'd be there, and people would ask me, how long are you here? And I'd say, well, I'm here until I'm not. And that was the day I was taken by the Thanaquith family under that paperbark tree. And I was given a blessing, and I was given a name. You know your purpose is real when it works you and when it moves you. And so I give blessing for the name Keely, and I give blessing to my Aboriginal mother, Marianne, and a presentation is not a presentation of Napranum without Marianne being present. And so you may see her name on the screen, I'm not sure, but she's actually with us today. And so I'm going to stop sharing this presentation, if I can work out how to do that. And I'm going to ask Marianne to show herself. So whoever is with Marianne, can you help her out to unmute? Okay. So, well, this is now a Q&A time, and an opportunity for you to ask some questions, and we intended for you to meet Marianne as well. Marianne is in the community of Napranum. We think she is sitting in the library that has been named after her. So she may still turn on that camera or not, I'm not sure. But Matt, I think I'll ask you to facilitate any questions from the group, and I want to thank you all for staying with me. And for me, I've delivered this presentation in different versions hundreds of times. It always moves me because I know the depth of the stories and the depth of the people that I worked with. So thank you to all of you for listening.
I can confirm for you, and it's okay if we could have Annalise back on screen if she's still zooming. There you are. Marianne has been online and has been part of all of this. We've just had some difficulty despite, I actually saw cartwheels happening at the technical desk. We really wanted to bring Marianne in here. The Mayor opened the library so that Marianne could join us, and so all of the efforts have been made, and the enormous amount of work that's happened in Napranum nearly got all of you here together. Annalise, I mean, your story's really moving and really inspiring to see just the colour just leaping out of those photographs. And not really in a position to facilitate any questions, but I really can see, does Keely mean rainbow lorikeet? Is there a relationship there?
There is actually, and again, it's a very moving spiritual meaning. I asked Marianne, what does the lorikeet represent? And she said to me that it's the messenger between heaven and earth.
Oh, I wish I hadn't asked you. Now I feel sad.
And so
Annalise,
the image that I started with my parents' blessing, that was a beautiful gift from Marianne to give me a few years ago now.
Well, it's been a beautiful gift to have you with us here, and what a journey you've had to be with us across dimensions, really. It's so great to see you. I was really hoping to see you in person. I'm sure I will one day. Please, can we just give one more round of applause? Thank you.